Well, we're sinking our teeth into the story which you just saw there, the lead headline which you just saw there. And to do this right now, we have with us Mr. Clement Nwankwo, who is the Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. Mr. Nwankwo, welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you, Mokpe.
Well, quite a number of things happening on the political front. We have been dealing for a time with the electoral bill. I mean, what will eventually guide what should happen within political parties and the electoral process itself. But right now, we're seeing a lot of rumblings within the APC and the PDP. In fact, a cursory look at the headlines this morning, a lot of them focusing on what is happening in the PDP and also the fallout of the judgment of the Supreme Court, which reinstated or confirmed the governor of Ondo State. A lot of people saw that as a warning to the APC. I do not know what your readings of both the APC and the PDP is at this time, but if you add into the mix the fact that former INEC chairman, Professor Tahiru Jega, did say that APC, the Nigerians should abandon both the APC and the PDP. I do not know what you make of all of that. Looking at our polity ahead of the options that Nigerians will have in 2023. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Mokpe. I do think that all of this underscores the conversation that has been going on for a very, very long time. And it was quite prominent during the work of the Electoral Reform Committee headed by Justice Mohammed Uwais. The whole issue of internal party democracy, internal party discipline. I think that across all of the political parties, you may have cited the two major political parties, the ruling party and the main opposition party. But the truth is that across all of the political parties, the whole issue of internal democracy remains in focus. Yes, we've been focusing very much on some aspects of the Electoral Act or the Electoral Bill regarding voting powers of INEC and how elections should be conducted and how results should be transmitted. But the reality is that there are deeper issues as well with our political parties. Internal democracy is a major one. How do political parties choose their officials? How do they produce candidates for elections? What kind of primaries are conducted? Now, what you are seeing in these two main parties, and because the other parties are not as prominent, you are also not seeing, most Nigerians are also not seeing that there are challenges within these political parties. And it's a major, major challenge for reform for our political system, how you can get the political parties to maintain internal democracy or even achieve it.
Well, the Electoral Act did try to legislate a bit on that, stipulating how parties should elect their leaders and whether or not direct or indirect primaries should be the call. I think it was stipulating that direct primaries be the mode that political parties choose. But so far, it looks like legislators have kicked against that. I do not know for whatever reason. We also saw the congresses that happened in Lagos, well, not just in Lagos, the APC national congresses, even though it happened under some, fear that the Supreme Court judgment could have an effect on it. But even that did not go as smoothly as it ought to have gone in a number of states. I mean, there's a battle for supremacy amongst factions. I do not know what your, how far you think that the Electoral Act can legislate, so to speak, on what should happen within political parties, because some people believe that there ought to be guidelines. What are your thoughts on that as well?
The Electoral Act is very clear on how parties should conduct primaries, and it talks about direct and indirect primaries, and that hasn't changed. What is also very prominent in the Electoral Act is the provision that says that whoever the national chairman and national secretary of the political party submit as candidate is who INEC recognizes, unless, of course, the courts intervene. And we have seen the judiciary being a part of all of this that's been going on. Political parties, politicians, shopping for courts to take matters to and getting contradictory judgments. even of courts of coordinate jurisdiction. I think you can make laws, but you cannot regulate human behavior. And what we're seeing happen is the tendencies within human behavior to exploit every opportunity they can get, every loophole they can find to manipulate the system. I think that these are all signs that are quite worrying as we head towards the 2023 elections, that you will again see the courts make pronouncements or be invited to make pronouncements on what should be the internal political party issues. You're also going to see the courts being invited to stop one person or the other. Again, some of these decisions are really at the discretion and whims of some of the judges. And of course, if you do have judges who are steadfast, who are very willing to uphold the law, then you would see good judgments. But sometimes when judges make mistakes or are not willing to uphold the truth, then you will also see that the confusion will deepen.
Indeed, confusion is what we're seeing right now in a number of the major political parties who are about to participate in the upcoming Anambra governorship elections. You have said that it is very difficult to regulate human behavior, and for some people they believe that that is the crux of the matter, alongside a number of other issues. For instance, funding of political parties. There have been criticisms that the PDP exactly did not have, was a party of convenience. So also the party, the APC, which came together barely a few months before the 2015 general elections. I do not know. Where do you think that we need to start? Because for a number of people, they believe that we need to find, or political parties need to find an ethos, a body of guiding principles, and perhaps a leadership that is able to set everybody in line. Where do you think we're going to start with what we currently have on the ground? It would look like, from all of the confusion that we're seeing, it also provides an opportunity for political parties, if they're willing to introspect and perhaps start all over again. If they were to seek your advice, for instance, where would you ask them to start from?
Still the same question of internal democracy. What you do see in Nigeria, and you see it at all levels, people finding themselves in power and becoming arbitrary, acting with impunity. You see this at all levels. You go back to the question and look around some countries that are practicing democracy with us. You just are seeing what is going on in South Africa. The immediate past president, Zuma, being jailed by the courts simply for the offense of contempt of court. This is where you are seeing democracy in place, the judiciary acting independently. In Nigeria, that's really what we have to find. How do we ensure that people who hold even the minutest positions of power respect processes within themselves, respect the rules set out, and suffer consequences for not respecting this? I think that if you can get people understand the importance of respecting rule of law and processes, then you would have begun. But I think in Nigeria, that's a major issue. You look across what is going on in different spheres of governance, how people are treated without regard for their rights, with impunity, how security forces act against citizens, trample on rights. And there's a sense in which people feel that once they are in power, they can use it arbitrarily. Again, they set precedents because they are out of power. They become victims of the same system that they have worsened and entrenched. So I think it goes back again to parties determining and deciding that they have rules, they have constitutions, they have regulations, they obey it and they carry it out. But also really some greater level of inquiry into why judges allow themselves to be dragged into political party issues. I think there must be some code of conduct, some rules that define to what extent the judiciary can intervene in the internal affairs of political parties.
Indeed, and a number of people will agree with you on that, especially when you look at the conflicting judgments we have seen from courts of coordinate jurisdiction intervening in the different political parties in Broglio who are about to participate in the Anambra governorship elections. But it's going to be very difficult to ask political parties to follow the rule of law, to even obey their own rules without some intervention. Because some people will say that the manner in which political parties have carried on and the apathy that has greeted this on the part of Nigerians is also something worthy of note. I do not know if you agree that Nigerians feel some apathy towards political parties, and what needs to be done to awaken the interest of Nigerians into what happens within political parties, especially when you look at the fact that political parties too are very guarded in terms of what happens within their political parties. They tend to look at it as family affairs.
I think you have to go back to the whole question of democratization of our democracy. How do you democratize political parties? As it is, the reason why you have the struggle within the two main parties, and let's not even begin to look at the smaller parties, is the struggle for who emerges, who takes over power in 2023. And I can understand Professor Tahiru Jaga asking Nigerians to abandon the two main parties and look for alternatives. But the reality and the question is, what do the parties stand for? Do they have ideas? Do they have ideologies? Do they have principles? Do they have a direction or whatever it is that they want to deliver to Nigerians? Have they provided alternative direction in seeking for power from the present direction that we're in? The truth is really no. Parties are set up, they are not involving Nigerians. Nigerians are not feeling a part of a political party system. Nigerians would feel a part of it if they also have a stake in the political parties. But the way the parties are constituted, the way they are run, the lack of ideology within them means that Nigerians really are also calculating on the balance what party would basically, you have individuals take interest in this party simply because they are looking for avenues for achieving political power. And I think that as long as citizens don't feel a stake in the parties, and parties are controlled only by those who are seeking to grab power, then you really are just going to have these parties that exist as vehicles. And I don't know what the alternatives are when you don't have a mass movement of people deciding that this is a party that represents their beliefs, represents their ideas, and can deliver on those. As long as you don't have that, then you're going to have the two main parties who drive what they call structures at the grassroots, really hold on to power and toss power between themselves.
Do we really have a grassroots structure system, especially when you look at the funding of political parties? Oftentimes, there's a lot of reliance, and some people believe that that is what is particularly of big trouble to the PDP right now, having found itself out of power. There's been no central funding system, because before now, it is believed that a number of political parties get their funding from major principal partners or major principal office holders who also happen to be in government. They are somehow funded through government funds, not directly from the grassroots. I don't know if you would like to speak to the funding systems within political parties and how that has also contributed to the detachment that people generally feel, and also perhaps how that also affects the trampling of rights, the impunity which we see happening within the political parties.
I think that if you do have a controlled funding for political parties, and the Electoral Act actually goes to some extent in trying to address this issue by making the point about campaign finance and how much an individual can contribute to a political party. It sets limits to that. Unfortunately, these are not being oversighted. INEC has continuously made the point that it is stretched and cannot carry this out. And there is no specific government agency that then exists to do this work, which is why the conversation has been on for a while about an electoral offences commission, which will be empowered to strictly scrutinize the finances of political parties. It is still going on that government officials, both at state and national level, find some way of taking money from the public purse and contributing into the political party structures. And you find that the more a government official can contribute or contributes to a political party, the more they feel entitled to ownership of the parties, which is completely antithetical to democracy. And that's what we're seeing, especially playing out in the drag between or within the two main political parties, that they are finding that government officials, whether it is at the federal or at the state level, are making contributions. And those who feel that they are making the most financial contributions in the party tend to want to dictate to others who are making lesser or indeed no contribution how the party should be run. And they are going to see that play out as the parties set for their congresses in the coming months.
Considering the large appetite for funds now, even the Electoral Act is considering, expanding, has recommended that, political party or campaign financing be increased. Do you think that we could ever go back to a system whereby the people, that's the members of political parties, are the ones who truly fund their parties? Do you think that we could ever go back to that system, considering the expectation from the grassroots as well, that people up there should be the ones to fund the party? Do you think that that could ever be reversed?
It could be checked, and which is why we've been canvassing for a very long time. We did canvass that with the 8th National Assembly about an Electoral Offences Commission. That advocacy is still going on about establishing this. Yes, there will be limits to political party campaign finance. It might go up a notch or more, but certainly there will be a limit. And once you can enforce that limit and bring people to account who violate that limit, then of course the parties will search for a wider net of contribution to its pool. So I think it's really key and important that you do enforce even the limits that the Electoral Act has set. And once you do have an agency doing so and keeping an eye on this independently and fairly and objectively across the political lines, then you would see a situation where parties are not owned by individuals or a set of individuals or controlled by public office holders to their advantage. And citizens can then make more contributions, can then make more demands, and then can hold those that they have elected in the political party positions to account for the work that they do and for their respect of the party's constitution and as well the Electoral Act.
For a number of people, they had thought that the introduction of independent candidacy could be a game changer in political parties, because when candidates find out that, or people who have tried to get tickets within political parties are unjustly edged out, and they can comfortably run as independent candidates and give the parties a run for their money, that would force political parties to imbibe some level of internal democracy. Do you agree with those people who think that the introduction of independent candidacy could be a game changer within our political parties system?
Presently, there are 18 political parties that are recognized by INEC. So it would seem to me that you do have enough vehicles for candidates who feel edged out from what is considered the two leading parties to find a platform to contest. And we have seen that in places where these two main parties are dominant and some persons feeling aggrieved join another of the political parties that are not so prominent and win the elections. I do agree that, yes, you could have independent candidacy, and I do know that the National Assembly, in the reviewing of the Constitution, is looking at some propositions in this regard. But I also think that it needs to be carefully thought out and it needs to be carefully inserted such that you do not see politicians again proliferate the ballot boxes or the ballot paper, such that INEC has a logistical challenge of determining how to manage numbers of persons that show up on the ballots just simply because they have issues within their political parties. So there must be very stringent conditions that are set for anybody to qualify to be on the ballot as an independent candidate. But certainly there needs to be an alternative to the dominance of political parties and a response to parties who display gross internal democracy challenges such that citizens can find alternative vehicles for running for elections.
So I'm not quite certain. I mean, when you say that there have to be stringent conditions, are there any examples that we can learn from? Have there been places where, because really, I mean, the situation which you just proposed to could be an issue, that we could see so many names on ballot papers and people are, even the electorate is confused as to who to vote for, who's who. But I do not know if there are any examples that we can follow, because we've been told that even in neighboring Benin Republic, that system is practiced. I think a president or two ago, the president who emerged was an independent candidate. So I don't know, have you seen any examples anywhere that could face the potential problems or had the potential problems that we could face in Nigeria were we to introduce that, and what lessons we could learn from them?
There are examples that we have seen. The U.S., from which we derive several of our democracy model practice, does have provisions for independent candidates. We did see in the 80s candidates like Ross Perot running for president and requiring certain numbers of endorsements before they get on the ballot. So, and within the National Assembly, this debate has been going on as well. And in the 7th Assembly, where this proposition was put forward, but didn't sail through, there were conditions given for an independent candidate aspirant to satisfy. For instance, if you have a certain number of wards within a constituency, you need to have certain number of registered voters or percentages of registered voters endorse your nomination. So setting the threshold for the numbers that endorse a candidate's request to be an independent candidate is an important practice to ensure that you don't have anybody flimsily decide that they want to be candidates. We did see what happened in the 2019 elections, where you had more than 68 presidential aspirants and candidates clog the ballot paper, and a lot of them really were not serious with. They just wanted individual visibility rather than pursuing a serious presidential campaign. So we must really ensure that we take into account the logistical issues that arises from having an uncontrollable number of candidates on the ballot paper. But certainly, I think providing that this is an option for politicians or for citizens who seek elective office is desirable.
Well, I was going to ask you whether you thought that, you know, the problems that the current political parties, the major ones at least, are facing could lead to the implosion, and if that could happen and what effect it will have. But certainly out of time, Mr. Clement Nwankwo, I have to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. He's the Executive Director of Policy and Legal Advocacy Center. Thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily this morning.